Everyone, welcome to Wrestling Prep Podcast. We are here with head coach of Wrestling Prep, Carolyn Wester, and athlete Drew Morgan. I know Carolyn's been coaching camps and things like that recently. Drew has been coaching down at the Navy camp as well. And Carolyn, we were just talking before we started recording. You were coaching at a dual tournament recently, made a couple observations, and wanted to talk a little bit. That kind of got you thinking about some ideas. So talk to us about the competition and what you observed, and we can kind of kick things off there.
We were at a Tyrant Wrestling Duel, Bison Duels, which is an annual summer duel, which we've been going to for years. And I coached Team Shut high school team. And then I had one athlete on the middle school team, Joshua Schwab. And what I noticed was that these athletes there's redundant opportunity for them to execute and complete what they're trying to do in competition, but they don't have the knowledge of the very small details that I think everyone should know the first year they wrestle, and it costs them in duels that matter to them. Like for these kids this summer, ranking duels, ranking spots. There was a lot of ranked kids, and they wanted to beat them to improve their ranking for recruiting. And they couldn't because just some of these details that I think are paramount, they don't know. It's foreign to them.
Okay. What are some examples of things that you observed, some of these small details that may have been missing? And
sure. So I think one of the big ones is the concept of a circle. A lot of athletes, they when they're trying to go around their opponent, they literally make a circle when in actuality it should be a triangle. Because one, that's quickest. Two, it crowds your opponent. And three, it allows more opportunities for you to shoot. If you're circling, you can't shoot, or an angle won't present itself unless your opponent feels inclined to step to a certain position. If you make triangle steps, and you may remember this, Drew, we did this one day over at Eagle Alley, the triangle. It was Bafiatis, and so Malachi, you, Q, and we practiced it one afternoon, Toma, for an hour or two. And everybody was shocked at how much it affects your ability to crowd your opponent, to have opportunities to mat return and throw, and the availability to you hit a sweep, and how it forces your opponent to take 4 steps to every 1 step you take. And of course, that's a huge disadvantage. So that would be one. And I was just thinking to myself in terms of our next set of coursework, what I'm going to teach at Camp 2 and Camp 3, because our camps are progressive. So if someone comes to week 1, they're going to learn some stuff. When they come to week 2, it's going to carry on from that. And we do have athletes who come to week 2, didn't do what week 1 does, and we separate them for some subset of each day to try to catch them up. But these other things that the next group notices. And then when we were doing our postmortem after the tournament, we found that our athletes, Gage Wiggins, Harry Maltese, Joshua Schaub, who else was in that group? Liam Johnson, all had big wins. And in each case, they executed a piece of wrestling prep body leveraging movement and the technique that goes with it. And it was unstoppable by the opponent. And that made me realize in the postmortem that I need to spend more time with the athletes on teaching these basic concepts and how they apply it so they can be better. It's almost like washing, if you're a surgeon, washing your hands. I mean, it took so long for doctors to understand that they were taking germs and bacteria from one operating theater to another. And once they started washing their hands and they applied that, then the mortality rate and infection rate and success, mortality rate dropped, success went up. And I'm realizing, watching the athletes that I work with on the regular and the fighters I work with on the regular who know these concepts, And then anytime they learn something new, the concept becomes part of the technique. So it's almost like saying, I'm a surgeon, and today I'm going to operate on a hand, and tomorrow I'm going to operate on an intestine. But the concept of washing my hands is going to go with all of them. And I think that's an opportunity we have as people who are supporting wrestling, teaching wrestling, combat sports, jiu-jitsu, striking, that there's something to be said for us bringing it back and doing this. And I find that a lot of these athletes, they're super, at this duel, super excited to meet me. Like they, oh my gosh, dude, I'm so happy to meet you. But did they really want to learn anything that would make them better at everything they did? That was a concept they could not grasp. They could not grasp that I could show them something in 2 or 3 hours that would affect all of their wrestling. And I think in the span of an athlete, certain percent always needs to be on progressing their wrestling. And then I've always said, then the other part may be, depending on whether we're in competition season or not, tweaking to the competition. But it never should be just going from one competition to another. And now I'm wondering if we should progress the wrestling, always keep applying the concepts, tweak for competition. I think there's room for one more path in the bigger road that's going to help athletes get better quicker, particularly in jiu-jitsu and wrestling.
It almost seems like you're building a foundation of movement and almost building a vocabulary that then applies to kind of like learning a language, right? You learn a bunch of words and then you can string those words together to make sentences and communicate, rather than if you just accumulate techniques, you're just learning sentences and you don't necessarily have concepts that apply. You can teach someone something in 5 minutes that applies to, half of what they do on their feet, whereas you can spend days or weeks at practice trying to learn a whole new takedown series that they may or may not execute correctly.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I think I want to say that I feel responsible that I haven't put more emphasis on it. In the summer of 2022, when we were, or 21, we were at Eagle Alley, I literally wrote out concepts versus facts, laws versus technique. And we did it in a double Ferris wheel, and it was very effective. And then I let it go. And now I'm thinking, if somebody wants to come in a room at a certain level with certain athletes, that maybe they need to be able to articulate in some sort of a format, whether it's multiple choice question, verbal answers. They have to be able to answer and demonstrate some of the concepts and where they use them. Because what happens is we get in a room and the highest common denominator, always whatever they need to work on, everybody else needs to know. But they often already understand and use the concept. So the other athletes see it and they want to jump here, but they're, no more likely to be able to do it than you can drop me into Uganda and I can speak the language there and survive. Never happened, right? I don't have a clue. Not one word. I don't even know what the official language is. And that's almost what it's like for people. So if you have athletes, even if they're learning technique from somebody else, but they already understand the concepts, whoever's teaching it, they're going to be able to execute it and retain it. So we have all these kids that go to camps all over the country and they learn somebody's series. They go by themselves or maybe with a group of kids. Nobody's filming it. Nobody's testing them on it. Nobody's making flashcards to make sure they get it. All things that we've done before. And then they're going back and their parents have spent thousands of dollars and they go to apply it in their preseason and their preseason club coach goes, oh, that didn't work at the local tournament. Get rid of that because this is my minutes. And they're not all on board sort of this lane of where we're going. So I'm fortunate that Drew's around. I'm fortunate that Ben Harder's is around. I'm fortunate that Isaiah Fenton is back this summer, and Ian Morales, and then Ethan Miller from Missouri, who wrestles at Maryland, just told me he's going to be coming over. Calvin Widmer is back. These guys understand some of the concepts, so it's easy for me to divide people up and work with them. But maybe there should be some sort of, maybe we should do some sort of system where someone is coming to our camp that we could pre-teach them via video some of the concept and have it, get it and retain it, and then test them on it when they get to camp. Not like you're in, you're out, you're bad, you're good.
Right.
Let's see where they are and start to work with them that way as we move forward, into working online with people in the fall. All the trips, Drew and I, we're doing Helsinki, Eugene, Oregon, Kirkland, Washington. How much further could we get if we could get those concepts taught before we got there? And then maybe even have a system where if somebody starts at wrestling prep, that they can go through, not a certification program. Someone just recently bought the course and they said to me, I finished the course, how can I get certified? I'm like, oof. I haven't even answered his text yet. So if he watches this, he knows it's him. But he's like, is there a coach's clinic? I'm like, should be. We need to do one. But I'd like to get that organized because I'm realizing a bigger contribution to wrestling would be doing it this way.
Well, instead of teaching techniques, you're almost teaching a set of principles that you could then apply to both your technique and anyone else's technique.
Well, that was so great. So today I spent about an hour with Harry, and I had him do this technique that I'd seen, one piece I'd seen a part of from Grant Leith in the semis, the Super 32, like in 2008 or something, or, some crazy time frame ago, 2011. But I took it and I had Harry do all these things, and Harry's like, oh, I don't have to worry about being stuck under anymore because you just showed me 15 variations of the movement I already know now as technique. I'm safe.
Yeah.
And so I think I think that's what I'm trying to get at, and what I want to spend some considerable amount of time doing going forward.
Yeah, that makes
What do you
sense.
think, Drew?
Yeah, Drew, I was thinking too, maybe to get you thinking a little bit. I know you've been in your career in a bunch of rooms with a lot of amazing coaches. Can you think of situations where you were learning technique and you were able to take some of these general principles that that Carolyn had taught you early on, and then sort of apply those to the technique that you were learning, and marry those two together to make them more effective?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely notice it kind of now in all technique I learn, or just kind of watching people wrestle in general. Just because I've been with Carolyn so long and wrestling with her basically every summer for pushing like 8, 9, 10 years now, how long it's been. So for me, I'm able to see it in a lot of just wrestling in general because I've been exposed to it. But for me, it's like, it's kind of spot on with what she's saying, is like, I think a lot of people, no matter their skill level, whether they're just starting or, they're world-class UFC fighters and stuff, I think why so many people gravitate toward her is because a lot of these principles are easily applicable and noticeably more efficient or more effective, whatever term you want. I guess both effective and efficient. Like for example, the straight wrist. I mean, that's the one I kind of always go to because it's such a simple concept that I think people can grasp. It's, when you're grabbing something, right, you're strongest when your wrist is straight, right? And I don't know if this is the example she used or if it's someone else or where I picked it up one of yours, but she would say, like, if you were to pick up a bucket, how are you going to pick it up?
Yep.
Right? You're not going to grab it like this, right? Whenever you pick something up, whether it's like you're doing farmer's carries, or you're taking the groceries in, something heavy, you're going to be grabbing with a straight wrist, right? You're going to be bending at the knuckles, and you're going to grab. And it was like, to me, my 16, 18-year-old brain, whatever, was just like, of course, like, yeah. And then when you do it on someone and you feel the effectiveness, you're like, oh, it's a no-brainer. And that's before you even get into the 90-degree angles and some of the larger concepts that, especially for someone that's wrestled a long time, they maybe it's just so new to them. They're almost resistant for a second just because it's new. I get it, like it's kind of breaking your mold or your brain for what you've thought of wrestling wise. But for me, those concepts are so effective. So many of these people gravitate to her because it's like, boom, I can apply that right now in all the technique I do. No matter what she teaches me or no matter how much more I work with her, I can see the effectiveness. And then let alone the people that want to be the best, they go, oh, this is so effective. She clearly has more to give. I'm going to stick around with her. And I think that's why, especially high level people gravitate to her because they could recognize those principles right away. Like she said earlier, when people come in a room, they can usually pick up on that stuff pretty quick.
Yeah, and I want to say, I think a lot of athletes are not taught early about capacity to learn. They are not asked to have capacity to learn. So when you say something that is foreign to them, they've been taught to reject the obvious. They've been taught to reject it and it has to be from a famous person, or it has to be so-and-so has to have approved it, or it has to be, all these things. And that just isn't helpful or the case. So a lot of kids, they're so worried about, and I don't want to talk about this too long at all, because I want to stay on the other topic. They're so worried about what their coaches think of them, and they have genuine fear. If they do something different, they're going to hear it or get it from either their parents or coaches, or they're going to miss the attention they get from being considered so good.
Well, yeah, I think of it too as like, I think just a lot of coaches, like kind of Carolyn said, they just haven't been exposed to as much technique or just wrestling in general at the highest level. So a lot of time, in their mind, this is like how I did it, or this is how I was taught. So this is how I'm going to teach it. This is how you should do it. And it's like, yeah, any technique or body position or anything can be effective because some people have drilled it so much and they're just so proficient in that. But it's not the most efficient way, right? So, there might be someone that shoots in high C and they've just locked it down. They've done a million high C's, so they're good at it. But if you bring in a new wrestler, right, like you're not gonna be able to hit a high C on someone. Like and they may be starting late. They might be starting at 14. They don't have the a million reps to get to be efficient at that. Whereas when you start applying Carolyn's principles, right, I've seen it firsthand. Like you can get kids that become very good very fast.
The list of kids who came out of nowhere after spending a summer at wrestling prep is, I don't even know how we could go through it all. How we can name them all. Even the ones who came to our Sunday program for years and years and years in California got significantly better.
I remember.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I just remember that summer, was it 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, in the warehouse there, all these kids from California. I wasn't super impressed by the wrestling from a lot of them, but then 2-3 years later, they were placing in state in California, which is a huge accomplishment. I never got close myself as an athlete, and so but like Eric Yang, Drew was there. Those kids. The first time I saw them wrestle, I wasn't super impressed. But watching their careers unfold after learning some of these general principles and being able to apply them in various situations, it was really cool to see how average athletes, these I don't think, and this isn't an insult to Drew at all, but I don't think you're one of the most gifted athletes genetically, but you worked hard and you learned a set of general principles and have been able to become really successful by applying these general principles and working really hard. And it's not just that you were gifted with it, and there are a lot of good athletes that are kind of gifted with the ability just inherently move well. But by breaking it down and thinking about these things as principles, then it allows for anyone to be successful, not necessarily just those that maybe stumble upon doing things in an effective way.
Oh, Eric Young's a perfect example. I mean, he started coming around in 7th or 8th grade with his older brother, Terry. And in 9th grade, his dad, didn't want him to wrestle anymore. So he had to learn to play violin or piano, which is, as Eric would say it was a typical response of his ethnicity, in the Bay Area. And I promised Eric's dad he would go to a great school. And of course he did at Northwestern.
Mhm.
But when Eric Yang made it to the semis in California, and all those years he was the sub on the Sundays or the person dealing with the knuckleheads, or all the effort he put, he's like, why not always do your best? When he hit DJ Lauren in the semis, the arena went crazy. So many people knew him. He lost to DJ. I think DJ went on to win state, but it was such a big deal. And his high school coaches, who were heinous to me in every possible way, from gossiping to spreading slander to having me thrown out of tournaments because I was just there. I didn't do anything but be there for Eric. They were so proud. And I remember somebody saying to them, isn't Eric the first person who's made it to state in the last 30 years or placed at state? And they said, yes. And they said, how many of these athletes in here that Eric's practiced with every night after your practice and on Sundays for 4 years are have been associated with wrestling prep? And that's what is crazy. There's a lot of people who will say that the concepts are really effective. I think a lot of times too, we really should start focusing. I'm switching a little bit on how I think the word concept is often associated with like, that would be nice, but it's just a concept, so it's not a necessity.
Right.
But if you think about a concept in the concept that all people are created equal, therefore, the way you're speaking to someone in this moment doesn't work, and it's actually actionable by law, adds value to that concept, whether it's you're fearing it because you don't want to get the pain of the legal consequence, or it's helping you. And I think if we can show we're embracing the concept, and the way you embrace it is to make action out of it, apply it in action, and that prevents the consequence of not doing as well as you can and enhances you getting what you want from the sport. And trying to teach that way would be extremely helpful. And I think almost having a set of coursework or concepts that people need to review before we start working with them, and whatever, private lessons, online, small group camps would be really great. Just this past week, I got contacted from someone. They said, I'm a local dad. I'd like you to work with my kid privately. When are you available? So I call him, and he's telling me his kid goes to this wrestling practice of this coach. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know who they are. And then he said he went to this high school, and I said, yep, that's cool. He won the blank award. I said, actually, I know the dude, the award's named after my cousin, but he wasn't open. I said, hey, I don't, he goes, we just like maybe to do one practice. I said, no. I said, I have to book 6. I said, I don't work with people anymore who don't book 6 or 3 to 6, depending on what the situation is. And he's like, well, that's a pretty far drive from about 5 minutes from where I live here to the facility in Manassas, which is really 35 minutes. And I said, we have athletes here who flew 20 hours to get here.
Yeah.
And so those people are never going to get, they're not never. Initially, they're not going to get what I'm saying. They don't get it. So that group will probably never catch on, but I think we can start working with athletes differently in wrestling,
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu, striking, and it'd make a big difference. And almost have, subset of coursework that people can get their hands on and use.
And this sounds like, as a science teacher, we have what we call cross-cutting concepts that sort of go across all branches. Like cause and effect is one of them. Like the whole basis of experimentation is that cause and effect, and even energy and mass, for example, the conservation of energy, conservation of mass. You can apply that to biology, to chemistry, to physics. Those principles work no matter what you're in. Not only does it help you understand various principles, but it also gives you a whole new way of looking at what you're doing and learning new things. So it's almost like these principles, not only can they make what someone's already doing better, but then it also allows them to learn things new more effectively, and also probably opens up a whole bunch of possibilities that they maybe never even thought of. Because I was wondering, as you were describing at the beginning, how many wrestlers and coaches throw out good technique because it just doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is not that the technique isn't effective, it's that they're not applying these general principles. They don't have an understanding of these principles, where actually your ankle needs to be here, your wrist needs to be straight, you have to be those little things would make the technique work, whereas they just throw it out because it doesn't seem to work. And maybe, as Drew was saying earlier, there's probably a lot of coaches who maybe don't understand these general principles and were effective at certain techniques because they just happened to stumble upon a good way to do them. But if you don't understand the principles, then you probably have a really hard time explaining how to do your technique to someone else who doesn't stumble upon the correct way to do it. But if you have a good understanding of these general principles that you're talking about, then you can effectively explain why your technique works and the steps along the way, the body positions you need to be in to make that effective in competition.
And congruent to that is I think with a teenager, a sixth grade to a sophomore in college, the quickest way to get them to be open is to show them how everything they do does not work against somebody who understands these concepts and applies the principles. Then they go, whoa, or they're just stunned. One of the athletes was here from Scotland. We were working yesterday, and he was leaving to go back to Edinburgh today. And so we went through all of his questions. They're mostly jiu-jitsu and striking based, but they're the same for wrestling in so many ways. And he had just thought and thought, like, every time I do this, or when I spar, or the guy who's the UFC guy at my gym, I'm like, oh, move your left foot to the left 3 inches, tighten that calf. And he's like, he's this is his second summer, so he's used to he's not totally going to pass out or anything, but that's the big thing. And it's kind of interesting because there's a new promotion called the Craig Jones Invitational that's coming up, and it's amalgamation of a lot of MMA. It's like, you can't do all the things, not all striking, kicking. I'm not sure what it is, but I have interestingly been contacted by 7 athletes asking if I could work with them to help them leverage the different shape of the fighting. It's not an octagon. Okay. It's more like a rectangle. And I said, I can't, because you're in the same weight class as Luke or Muhammad Ali, who are the 2 I've worked with previously, who I'm going to stick with in this event. But I can see that people are starting to get that maybe I have something to add, not me personally, but the concepts and the the concepts and the principles that are going to help them be the differentiator. And I just don't, it's a $1 million purse. So I don't think people who are after $1 million purse are going to waste their time.
Yeah.
That's
That's
for
the
sure.
great thing about being principle based is that you're presented with a brand new situation. Here's a new amalgamation of fighting styles. Here's a different arena competition. Let's go back to those general principles and see how we can then build a strategy to be
Yes.
effective.
Right, go back. So we're in this place. What is the concepts that apply to this? What are
Right.
the facts, the principles, the facts that apply to this? What, body leveraging will activate your muscles to do this,
Well, taking it back to just wrestling prep in general and the camps and stuff, kind of backtracking a little bit, back to the principles too. How I look at the principles also is doing somewhat of a coursework as well, and people having a front knowledge of at least the 5, 6, maybe most basic things, is it really opens them up to learning so much quicker at camp,
Mhm.
or in a 4 or 5 day session, 3 day session, however long they have spending to come train with Coach Carolyn. Because at least as an athlete myself that would come to work with Carolyn and, obviously help with camp as well. And, giving back to kids that are just starting their wrestling journey. But I was also actively training, and it would kind of drive me crazy seeing these kids come in and we're like hashing over these new
Right.
or the same principles just with new people. Because for me, it would almost get to the point of like selfishly, like, hey, we're wasting an hour and a half
Well,
trying to prove to
Drew
these
would say,
trying to prove to these kids that a straight wrist is the most efficient, or that a line beats a
Right.
circle, which
Yeah.
to me it was just like, having gone through school now and stuff, like I understand the math of it and the concept,
Mhm.
but it was also just like, dude, clearly a freaking line beats a circle. You run around this mat, I'm gonna walk a straight line. Who's gonna get there first? Like, boom.
Right.
All right. To me, it was like, that's it. We win. And, of course, they're kids and they're new, so they want to argue or whatever. So it drive me a little crazy, selfishly wanting to train and work on the stuff I wanted to work on, which Karen was very good at. Like, she's very good at, we're going to train to the highest level person in the room.
Yeah.
well,
I think it's going to help these kids even more,
Mhm.
because now if they can grip these concepts early and go, oh, this works, A, they're going to be more open-minded, and B, you can move on to some of the more fun
Mhm.
or advanced stuff that is maybe a little more directly applicable to what you're seeing in matches, because you grasp these principles, concepts, whatever
Right.
term you want to put with it.
and in fact, it's so infuriating. I had this experience when Drew was wrestling here at Robinson High School, and in the last chance Olympic qualifier, I'd gotten a message from an athlete who asked if they could spend some time with me because they were super interested in what I was doing, etc. And when he found me in the place, he asked me to, I was sitting with Drew and Blaze and Coach Robinson from SEM, like my whole safe crew. And he wanted me to separate from them. And I thought it was for sound, like so he could hear better. And I said, yeah, I went to high school here, so I know we can go sit. There's some benches. And we went out. But his whole point was that he had made a 72-page, I think it was 72-page AI document proving that a circle is faster than a line in the world. And did I want to review it so I could correct myself? And he wanted me to review it. And I took me a minute to understand what was going on. Well, I'm like, well, we're just talking about a 28 feet, a straight line's faster than a circle. I'm not talking about launching ships into another galaxy.
Right.
And he just wanted to prove me wrong. And I let him know that I was not going to be following through with anything like that. And Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I haven't talked to Drew about it yet, but he's actually taken a few more steps to try to insert himself as someone who can instruct people and prove why I'm wrong.
Hmm.
Am I
Yeah, no,
crazy?
this
Like, it's so
idea
crazy.
of
I've just
principles and
I'm crazy.
yeah, yeah. This idea of general principle, not only can you add to what someone already does, but you can actually change the way they look at everything they already do and change their approach, which is like I think as Drew was saying in a high level room, not just giving someone a little tool to add to what they do, but you can give them some small thing that would change the way that they do a lot of the things they already do and make it more effective. And I was thinking, Drew, too, when you were talking about being at camp and the light bulb often, I remember that experience too. The light bulb goes off day 4 of a 5-day camp, and you're wondering, where would we be now? That which is awesome. That that they finally, after being demonstrated several times, they understand that, hey, this is something general that I can apply to everything I do. But if they arrived day 1, hit the ground running, where would we be on day 5? As opposed to taking you take the time, take the effort to sort of get to that point where you understand some of these general principles, and then go see Carolyn and see how that you can apply them in a lot of the things you already do, and a whole bunch of new technique you may never even thought of because of the way you can look at these principles, rather than having to be proven that they work for 3 or 4 days, finally understand, and then you have one afternoon session on the last day to kind of begin applying things, which is it'd be interesting. So yeah, I'm
Well,
excited to see how these ideas sort of come together, and how terminology comes together, and how some of the teaching aspects of these concepts, and how you think about organizing them and things. It should be really interesting
I
going
know
forward.
I've realized that I have no choice, that the so many more athletes are using the wrestling prep concept, principles, body leveraging, and technique, that now there's a huge influx of people reaching out, and I cannot meet their needs.
Mhm.
So in the way I've been operating before, so of course I have to change, and I'm down for changing. So that'll be something that I'm just going to have to force to happen, and probably pretty quickly.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to force that to happen, because I really want to keep affecting and helping and accelerating people's wrestling. And one thing I was going to say, back to the concept of, we were at camp for 4 days, and then on the 5th day, 4th day it came together, 5th day we're doing new things. The athletes that were here in Virginia who stayed with me for the 3 years Chris Creason was living here, because Chrissy was so advanced in a lot of this, so advanced that they actually jumped in and picked up almost where Chrissy was in a lot of things. So I guess what I'm saying is, I know that if somebody's exposed before and then they start, then they can go faster. Right? Chrissy wasn't teaching them. It was just me talking to Chris about his stuff, and then having it go on. So I do think it can be highly effective. And then you take athletes like Dante Hutchings, Tyler Lillard, people that I worked, Will Dieter, people that I worked predominantly with online,
Mhm.
and how much success they've had. And they say, I learned this online, and all we're doing there is concepts,
Right.
principles,
Yeah.
and they're applying it to their technique in their own practices, in their own rooms. Dante is very good about filming and sending it to me, and then scheduling time in his room where we could come in and he could practice in front of the camera. But he puts a lot of effort into continuing to learn, the body leveraging.
Yeah, and that's just one person, you're sort of bound by time and location, but putting some of these things online would be awesome because then they're available for all,
Yes.
and they can go from there, which is really good. So yeah, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for the conversation. You could definitely check out Wrestling Prep on Instagram, Facebook. Go to the website. You can see all the upcoming camps and clinics. I know there's two more in Virginia there.
It's
at,
July. We still have room for overnight and commuters on July 22nd to July 26th in Marymount University in Northern Virginia. And then our second camp, which is August 12th to August 16th. We have a
Yeah.
lot of space at that camp also, and we're looking forward to it. I have a trip to Branson, Missouri in the middle of all that, and then a small vacation with my adult children, and then we're off to Helsinki, Finland.
All right.
So
Yes, ma'am.
And then Drew, I saw you on the list for volunteers. Are you there later this month, or are you gonna, or is
Yeah,
that the one in August, or both?
week 2, I'll be there. Week 3, I'm looking to move across the country. So
Oh, all
I'll
right.
be a little busy
So
at that week, but
you guys will be hanging out there at camp in a couple weeks. That's awesome.
yeah, it'll be awesome.
there's a
All
big
right.
crew coming. There's a lot of D1 wrestlers coming from major programs like Iowa and
That's awesome.
to camp.
Oh, it'll be great to hear about next time. All right. Well, thanks, and we'll be back soon. Bye.
All right, thank you.
Sounds great.